Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte for innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning. Turn to Deloitte. Well, in the Upper Echelon this week, Richard Pike, who's the chief executive at Adcorp. And Richard, most chief executives or business leaders wait until they're almost in the grave before they write books. You've, I think, just turned 50. You've got two behind you already.
Yeah, Alec, and I've just contributed to a third, but one of them has been particularly important to me, and it's been 30 years in the making, and it relates to an incident that happened to me in 1981, and something I've thought about for a long time, so maybe that's why I've done it a little bit early, and related to an accident I had in 1981 and my recovery and the life lessons I learnt from that process.
Tangled toes, pins and needles.
That's
I loved it. Knowing you, I suppose, made it easier for me to understand, but it was quite an extraordinary recovery that you achieved from being, well, near paralyzed.
Yeah, it was, and it's interesting, when you're in the moment, you kind of don't really appreciate it. I remember waking up exactly a year to the day later and thinking, do you realize what's just happened to you? And I think when you're going through it and you're so badly injured, and I'd broken my back in 3 places and had done a whole lot of other damage to myself and was really close to death, I kind of didn't really, I suppose, think about the consequences of it. I just thought solely about survival and about recovery. And as I say, once I sort of got beyond that, and that was about a year later, that's when I sort of started thinking about the implications, and that's when the idea of writing the book came.
I have a niece who is a physio, and she complains that many people she works with are too lazy to go home and do the exercises that they should. Why were you different? Why did you just push yourself that hard? And it seems to almost be the human condition to take it easier if it's possible.
Yeah, I think your niece is right. And in fact, you get 2 types of people. I think those that are lazy, but you do get people that are driven. But I think, with me, I was very sporting at the time. The whole incident was related to sport, to rowing. I was very fit. I'd just come out of the army. I think I am quite a driven person, very motivated, and I learnt an invaluable lesson in the army, which was called fussbait, which South Africans at the time did. And I kind of learnt to deal with adversity and to never, ever give up. And it's a sort of a legacy, I think, that stayed with me, but it helped me no end through that process. And just being so into sport, recovery and recuperation, it's almost like going to gym each and every day. So effectively, I was a professional sportsman for the best part of a year, trying to recover and putting in a lot of hard effort and sweating and just absolutely loving it.
And today you still walk with a little bit of a limp, but you're playing golf, and no one who were to see you in action just on a normal day-to-day basis would know that you'd been through such a horrific accident. Do you still work at it?
Yeah, I do. I cycle a lot. I just did the 94.7 last year and did it in a reasonable lick, doing the Argus this year. So I do a lot of cycling. I do a lot of biokinetics, gym, play a lot of golf, as you said, a lot of boogie boarding, swimming in the sea. Walking. So I'm a very active person, and one of the decisions I took at the time of this accident is I'd never let it stop me from doing anything, and I haven't let it stop me from doing anything or anything that I wanted to do. I never rode again because of the essence of the injury, but yeah, probably more active than most, and it's almost, I suppose, to prove a bit of a point to myself. I'm a bit of a risk taker. I ride motorbikes as well, which is a bit silly, I know, and probably too fast, but I think kind of it makes me feel alive, and when you've been close to death, it's quite a sort of rejuvenating feeling.
It's very public exhibition of a very private event, though, and a very private person, I suppose, in many other respects. Why did you decide to go ahead and do it? What was the motivation?
Yeah, you've hit on a very interesting issue. I think I am an extremely private person. I know I'm a private person, and yet I just put it all out there, and I wanted people to absolutely live and experience what I experienced. And there's some ugly stuff in there as well. My personality was anything but shining as far as the nursing staff were concerned, and my language was concerned, and some of my antics and behavior and bad behavior in the hospital. But I just wanted people to live the experience that I'd lived, and it's quite irreverent. I've written it with a sense of humor, so there's quite a lot of humor in the book, and that was quite important as well, because humor is a survival tactic when you're facing adversity. And that year, my brother, who was part of the accident, myself, we just laughed. We laughed our way through it. We would compare our injuries and just how horrible they were, and kind of who was more injured than the other, and that would elicit this sort of humor response. And there's no doubt it is cliched, but that laughter is the best medicine.
The other book is of a completely different type, the one that you co-wrote with Lone Sharp and Ted Black, called The New Divide, looking at employment. Often when I read through that, it almost reminded me of Tony Leon, and when he was in politics, how he would be extremely confrontational. I suppose when you're talking about employment, there's hardly any other way to do it.
Yeah, we wanted to be controversial is probably the right word. We wanted to elicit some kind of response. You know, if you look at the unemployment problem in South Africa, in my view, it's singularly the biggest problem facing this country, and there was absolute inaction at the time that we wrote this book. And we called it the new divide because in essence there is a divide in our society between those that have formal employment and those that don't. And the numbers are starting to sort of even up on either side of that divide. And so we almost have a new apartheid in our society between, as I say, formal employment and those that are either informally employed or not employed. And so we wanted to make a statement and wanted to elicit a response. And I think we successfully did that. If I look at some of the stuff that's contained in the National Planning Commission's recommendations. There is stuff that's come out of the book, and some of the language that's been used by politicians, we can see that that's been taken from the book. So I think it had a good effect, a desired effect. And I probably didn't make some friends in certain quarters, but that's not what it was about. It was to get action.
The worry about that, I guess, is that apartheid encouraged the abuse of workers, and perhaps for some politicians it's the most sacred issue on their agenda, that they won't ever allow it to happen again. And even if it makes sense economically, if you are allowing or even have a perception of allowing abuse of workers again, you'll be hitting a brick wall.
I think that's what apartheid became, but it didn't start that way. Apartheid started as essentially job protection. It was protecting white jobs from black workers who were very happy to work for lower wages. And that's what we have at the moment, is we have a labor market where we have the unionized worker is absolutely protected, and protected from the ununionized worker and the unemployed worker who's trying to enter the job market and is prepared to come in at a lesser wage. And so, if you look at the beginnings of apartheid and you look at the beginnings of what we're seeing in our labor market policy here, there's a great similarity.
Almost like job reservation revisited.
It is, yeah.
Extraordinary. As far as your business is concerned, and you are a chartered accountant, why did you decide to go into the field that you had at Adcorp, recruitment and more of a services business?
I was always very involved in training right through university. I used to do quite a lot of mentoring and tutoring at university, and then I joined Deloitte where I did my articles and was very involved in the training portfolio at Deloitte, did a lot of lecturing and absolutely loved it, and then moved into doing some lecturing at WITS. And at the time I would have loved to have been an academic, but it didn't pay any money. But the opportunity came in 1994 when the country opened up to the rest of the world, and myself and a partner represented two UK universities into South Africa, and that gave us the opportunity to get back into something we both yearned for, which was education, but on a private basis. And that's the business that I ultimately sold into Adcorp, and so that's how I ended up in the position that I'm in.
And how is that business still going?
That business is still part of our portfolio. It's called PMI, Production Management Institute of South Africa. And it's going really well. We facilitate more learnerships in South Africa than any other party. We do about 7,800 learnerships a year. Overall, we train about 30,000 people through that facility. So I think we're making a big difference. And we've moved into areas like artisan training, where there's an acute shortage in South Africa. And we have capacity now to train about 2,500 artisans. And in terms of the National Growth Path projections and targets, they're targeting about 12,000 a year, so we can make quite a big contribution to that.
Is that where the new focus is going to be, given that there's a lot of pressure, no doubt, on the recruitment side of the business with the internet?
Yeah, I think that you'll still have a lot of recruitment that'll be face-to-face, particularly the more senior jobs. The internet will probably play less of a role, but you're right. I think social networking is going to play a bigger role in terms of recruitment. So, we're trying to enter that space ourselves. We want to become part of the solution, and, it might ultimately cannibalize some of our existing business, but hopefully it'll be a lot bigger. And I think if you look at technology and social networking and the internet, it's typically very high volume and low margin, whereas a typical recruitment agency would be something of the opposite. So we see big changes. Training we see is a massive growth area for us. There's just such a backlog, and it's a travesty, the unemployment problem I mentioned just now. Despite the fact that we have such unemployment, we still have about 800,000 vacancies in the upper echelons, we estimate. So there's a huge demand to train people.
It's interesting, that point, because as far as JSE listed companies are concerned, the hottest of the moment is a private education company, Curo. I'm sure you've seen the progress of Shani Baton's business there. It's been extraordinary. Is that not an area that you might get more aggressively involved in?
That's not our business. That's a business-to-consumer model, and we're a business-to-business model. We have been in that. In the past, we had some colleges, and it's quite a difficult model. It's a lot to do with debt collection, which is very different collecting from consumers than it is for collecting from big corporates. So I think it's a very different mindset that you need to get into that game. So that doesn't fit our model. Our model is really focusing more in the tertiary area.
Richard, how long have you been running Adcorp for?
I've been the CEO for, I think this is my 11th year. In April it'll be 11 years, which is a long time.
I wanted to confirm that because there is a fashion, and possibly even your recruitment guys will be encouraging this fashion, that CEOs should stick around for a little, well, not as long as that. And often I have this discussion, this debate with chief executives about why is it necessary for so many of them to leave so quickly. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I signed on, I originally, in my mind, thought I'd do it for 5 years, and those 5 years came and went very quickly, and I think I achieved quite a bit in that time and loved it, and did the next 10 years, which came up last year, and or the year before, and I'm sort of looking at the next 5 years, and there's just so much that I think we still need to accomplish. I think that the business is going to look fundamentally different in the next couple of years to what it looks like now. We've got a lot of initiatives like the sort of technology areas that I talked about. So I'm very excited, and I have said to my board and my chairman, the day that they think I've passed my sell-by date, please tell me. I'm not going to be like a prize fighter and keep on coming back for more. But I'm loving it, and hopefully I'm doing a reasonable job. And the day that I feel that equation changes, then yes, I'll move on. But definitely, I've got unfulfilled ambitions with this business.
Talking about chairman, you have to have been one of the most privileged business people around, having worked closely with Frederick van Zyl-Slabbert, the late Van, as we know him. Did he inspire you in any way? Did he leave you with anything?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, ironically, I was talking about him last night. I think other than my father, he's one of the most influential men in my lives, and I was just so honored. And, I think a lot of my thinking, my philosophies, my understanding of politics, I got from Van, and we had wonderful discussions, and he was just such a wonderful, wise man. And I think, the word wisdom is what summed him up. And I got asked the other day by someone if I could have dinner with any person, who would that be, living or dead? And, although I had many a dinner with Van Zyl, there's no doubt that he would be the man that I'd want to have another dinner with, because there are a lot of questions I'd like to ask him since his unfortunate passing about what his view would be on the current political situation in South Africa. And he would just have such an insightful and wise view of what was going on, and it was sort of the oh wow factor when he would share those thoughts with you, because it was just so synthesized and just so insightful.
Richard, you've clearly got a lot of exciting things on your plate. Are you one of those people who has plans or targets or 5-year goals that you work to?
Yeah, I'm very goal-oriented, and it goes back to that incident of the accident. I live by goals. I've got to see the future. I've got to visualize, and very much so. I think we've got probably about 5 or 6 very exciting strategic initiatives in the business, and I kind of see them. I visualize them, and I think leadership is a lot about that. It's about painting pictures. So it's not only kind of the words or the numbers that you're chasing. It's actually seeing the picture that elicits the emotion, because I think it's emotion that actually drives people at the end of the day. So I'm very clear about where I want to take this business, and that comes back to the point I made about the unfulfilled ambitions, that I see that picture and I've got to see it fulfilled in real life.
And broadly speaking, where would that be?
It's being absolutely the leader in the South African staffing industry. We are by size at the moment, but I think in terms of thought leadership, there's a lot that we want to do. We want to adopt a lot of sophistication in our business. We want to adopt a lot of technology in our business. We want to grow a significant financial services business alongside what we do, and that in that we place about 90,000 people on assignment on any given day, and there's a ready-made market for that. And in essence, what we're doing is we're developing atypical financial products for atypical workers. So I think there's a lot around that. I think the labour dispensation, I've been very involved behind the scenes in trying to forge where labour market policy goes. I've got some strong views about that. I'd like to see that fulfilled. And then I'd also like to see the business internationalized. We've got all of our eggs in one basket in South Africa. It's been great. The business has been going since 1978, and it's survived all kinds of traumas that this country has been faced with. So it's a very resilient business. But I do think that it would be good to diversify, and Africa is a geography that we've identified. We are there. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, but not to the levels that we see fit. So I would like to internationalize in the sort of developing, emerging market space.
Richard Pike, the Chief Executive of Adcorp. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.